Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I was gone for just 6 hours. When I came back, there was a steel gate across my private road, keypad lock, HOA logo, and a smug stranger telling me I no longer had access to my own land. That was their first mistake. Their second, thinking I'd back down. I was only gone for 6 hours. 6 hours tops. Just a quick run into town to pick up rebar, galvanized bolts, a pallet of concrete mix, and 3 new solar floodlights for the path leading to the cabin. Nothing fancy. I even treated myself to a cheeseburger and milkshake at McGregor's Diner before heading back. That was my first mistake, taking my time. The second I turned off Route 41 onto the gravel trail leading to my forest land, my stomach dropped. Someone had installed a gate, a big one. Heavy-duty steel frame, welded supports, a keypad access box, and, just for extra insult, a laminated sign zip-tied right in the center. Maple Heights HOA, critical infrastructure access, restricted entry, authorized vehicles only. For a moment, I just stared at it, like maybe I'd hallucinated. Then I looked again. No, it was real, solid, anchored into the gravel with fresh concrete, pillars dug into the forest floor like it belonged there. It didn't. I would know. This was my land, my family's land. 130 acres of Oregon wilderness deeded to us since 1968, private, sovereign, and explicitly excluded from any HOA jurisdiction. I pulled my truck up close, stepped out, and ran my hand along the weld seam. Still warm. Whoever did this hadn't finished long ago. Then I heard footsteps. A man in his 30s came walking out from behind a thicket, wearing a reflective vest with the Maple Heights HOA logo and holding a sleek tablet like it was a badge. His posture was all confidence. I recognized the type. Clipboard soldier with a digital god complex. "You can't be here," he said without even a greeting. I raised an eyebrow. "You're on my land." He pointed to the sign. Maple Heights has initiated Phase 1 of the Forest Perimeter Integration Plan. This is part of the Regional Access Upgrade. The board sent 3 certified letters. I'm not in your HOA. Well, the expansion zone includes proposed utility right-of-way easement corridors. You didn't respond to our outreach, so I don't owe you a damn thing. Not a response, not a right-of-way, not a square inch. This gate, I tapped it with my knuckle, is trespassing. You've blocked my legal access to my home. He looked slightly rattled but doubled down. We were advised that Maple Heights has the authority to control temporary infrastructure access while construction is active. The development plan was approved by the board, which has zero authority here. He blinked. Sir, if you could submit a request to the compliance board, we could... No, I got back in the truck. He waved frantically. Wait, if you damage that structure, it's considered destruction of... I threw it into reverse, backed up 20 yards, then gunned it. The Raptor's engine roared like a pissed-off bear, and the moment the bumper hit the gate, the whole thing folded like a cheap lawn chair. The keypad sparked. Steel scraped and snapped. One of the posts ripped clean out of the gravel, and the entire frame tipped over with a solid, satisfying crunch. Dust settled. I drove over the wreckage and parked just inside my tree line. The clipboard warrior was still standing there, slack-jawed. "You're insane," he barked. "You can't do that." I stepped out, looked him in the eye, and said calmly, "I've seen this done in movies. Figured I'd give it a go." I walked past him, up the incline to the house, flipping on my perimeter surveillance as I went. The motion sensors blinked green. My security system, military grade, courtesy of a few favors I never had to repay, hummed to life. I adjusted the angle on one of the pole cameras and started cataloging footage of the unauthorized installation. By the time I brewed coffee, I'd already transferred the footage to 2 off-site drives and my encrypted cloud archive. I flagged the timestamp. I had everything I needed. The gate's arrival, the fresh concrete pour, the branding, the sign, the smug little bastard with his tablet. Beautiful. Then I called my lawyer. "Guess what these HOA nutjobs just did?" I said. "They installed a gate. On my land. Locked me out." There was a pause. Then her dry voice crackled through. "How long do you need me to be angry?" 48 hours, maybe 72. Done. I'll start a paper trail, start documenting everything. They're probably stupid enough to escalate. "Oh," I said, sipping my coffee. "I'm counting on it." The next morning, I woke up to the sound of crunching gravel. It wasn't deer, and it sure as hell wasn't wind. I slid out of bed, grabbed the tablet linked to my perimeter feeds, and pinched the screen to zoom in on camera 3, the one near the western tree line. 6 men in bright orange vests were stomping through my property like they were scouting a golf course. They had clipboards, measuring wheels, and fluorescent plastic flags they were jabbing into the earth every few feet. One of them even had a drone buzzing overhead like it was some real estate commercial shoot. I watched for a minute, still half in disbelief, until I saw one of them hammer a metal stake into the ground, square in the middle of the ATV trail I'd carved myself last fall. That was it. I threw on jeans, boots, slung my rifle over my shoulder, not chambered, but in plain view, and walked straight toward them. No yelling, just calm footsteps on dry needles and pine bark. The first guy to notice me flinched, then turned to alert the others. They froze like a bunch of second graders who'd just been caught graffiti tagging the teacher's car. "Morning," I said flatly. "Want to explain why 6 strangers are wandering around on private land tagging trees like it's a scavenger hunt?" One guy, balding, mid-40s, tan polo, and clipboard, stepped forward. "Sir, this is a preliminary survey for the Maple Heights Regional Connectivity Initiative. We're planning infrastructure upgrades to improve fire access and road safety. This will eventually benefit your area as well. My area doesn't need your benefit, and this land isn't part of your initiative." He gave a strained smile. "There's an ongoing discussion regarding regional integration and easement application. It's complicated." "No," I said, cutting him off. "It's not. You're trespassing. These flags, illegal. This drone, violating FAA low-altitude restrictions over private acreage. That metal stake, I pointed to the one in the ATV trail. You've got about 5 seconds to pull it out before I turn it into scrap." Another man, younger, muttered, "You don't have to be hostile. We're working in accordance with preliminary jurisdictional maps approved by the board." I smirked. "Which board?" "The Maple Heights HOA." I almost laughed. "They're not my government, my county, or my zoning authority. I don't answer to them. And unless your board has a warrant or a federal badge, you're breaking the law." They hesitated, exchanging glances. Then one of them shrugged. "You already damaged our gate. Technically, you've invalidated your own claim to peaceful ownership." That made me pause, not because he was right, but because I realized something. They were coached. Someone had prepped them with lines, maybe even told them to provoke me. "You just said that out loud," I said calmly, while standing on camera, my property, 6 feeds, audio and video. "Keep going. Say it again, slower." No one spoke. "Thought so." I turned and walked back toward the house, letting the rifle hang visibly across my back. They didn't follow, but they didn't leave either. Back at the cabin, I called my attorney again. They came. She didn't need clarification. How many? 6. Orange vests, fake confidence, and an off-the-shelf drone. She groaned. "All right, I'm sending a cease and desist letter with GPS coordinates, time-stamped footage, and full property title excerpts. I want names. We'll ID them one by one." "They flagged my trail," I said, "and tried to tell me I voided my own rights by wrecking their gate." There was a pause. "They're baiting you. Don't give them what they want." "I won't," I said. "But I'm documenting everything." That same afternoon, I brought in a licensed private surveyor, a guy named Dale, former Forest Service. He walked the whole western edge with me, triple confirming the property lines against official state records and the deed. "I don't know what the hell they're basing this on," he muttered, pulling out a fresh map. "But your land's clean. No easements, no overlays. This is yours. Full stop. We documented every flag, every stake, every point of intrusion, cross-referenced with GPS. By sundown, I had a neat PDF with photo evidence, a signed attestation from Dale, and an exported route log from my drone's flyover footage. I uploaded everything to my encrypted drive and sent backups to Meredith. That night, just before midnight, I reviewed the live camera feeds one last time before shutting down the system. Camera 2, facing the old access trail, caught a glint of light. I tapped to zoom in. Someone was back, alone, crouched by one of the flagged spots. I saw him pull a small black object from his bag and start screwing it to the base of a pine tree. It was a motion sensor trail cam. I smiled grimly and reached for my boots. 3 days after I caught someone mounting a hidden trail cam to one of my trees, I received an envelope that made me laugh out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. Hand-delivered, thick, and printed on heavy self-important letterhead. Civil complaint. HOA of Maple Heights versus Russell Lambert. I scanned the first page, and my eyes landed on the accusations in bold. Willful destruction of community infrastructure, aggression toward Maple Heights personnel, obstruction of safety-oriented development, intentional. Disruption of regional connectivity, emotional distress to community volunteers. The only thing missing was arson and witchcraft. I tossed the envelope onto my desk, opened a soda, and started reading page by page. It was garbage. Legal-sounding garbage, but garbage nonetheless. They called the gate a vital infrastructure element and described my actions as reckless vehicular assault. They claimed my destruction of the gate endangered lives and delayed a safety-critical ingress expansion project by weeks. They even quoted my line, "I've seen this done in movies," as evidence of premeditated malice. I called Meredith, put her on speaker, and read the complaint aloud while she made sarcastic commentary between bites of cereal. "I like this part," she said, chewing. He then proceeded to taunt the HOA's infrastructure representative with sarcasm and threats. "That's almost poetic." "They're trying to flip the script," I said. "Make it sound like I attacked them unprovoked." "Let them try. Your footage shows everything. Besides, you were locked out of your own property. That complaint's so bad it should come with a laugh track." "Are they serious, though?" "Oh, they're dead serious. This isn't just about the gate anymore. They're building a paper trail to justify a land claim. If they get the court to see you as a hostile actor, they can request temporary administrative oversight for safety reasons until the land dispute is resolved." "Even though there is no land dispute?" "Not yet. But you see where this is going." My jaw clenched. I'd spent years turning this land into a sanctuary, not just for me, but as something real, earned, sustainable. And now some HOA clown circus wanted to slap a sticker over it and call it theirs? I didn't wait. I printed off all surveillance stills, audio transcriptions, the surveyor's report from Dale, and every correspondence between me and their goons. Meredith drafted a response so sharp it might as well have come with a tetanus warning. We filed a motion to dismiss and a request for declaratory relief, asserting exclusive ownership, lack of any easement, and illegal obstruction of access. I also filed a counterclaim, not just for trespass, for malicious prosecution. They weren't just harassing me, they were abusing the legal system to intimidate a private citizen off his own land. By the end of the week, Meredith served a subpoena on the HOA demanding copies of the original development plan they kept referencing, the board vote that allegedly authorized the gate, any formal agreements with county or state authorities. Regarding infrastructure expansion through my parcel, 2 days later, we received a digital file dump that could only be described as slapstick. The development plan was a 5-page PDF riddled with typos, using Google Maps screenshots with a crude yellow line scrawled through my land and the phrase "suggested fire access path" written in Comic Sans. One of the diagrams literally had a clip art bulldozer on it. "This is their plan?" I said, blinking. "Looks like a middle school project," Meredith muttered. "Wait, look at the metadata. This was created 2 weeks ago. After you wrecked the gate." She dug deeper and found the real kicker. No approvals, no permits, no county involvement, and definitely no emergency planning authorization. It was all internal HOA fantasy, propped up with official-sounding nonsense. So we pushed back. We amended the counterclaim to include fraudulent misrepresentation and intentional abuse of administrative process. And I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't just protecting my property now. I was going to make an example out of these bastards. The day we filed the counterclaim, I walked the perimeter with my camera and spray paint, marking every point where HOA surveyors had planted a flag or drilled a stake. I put up signs warning of active legal dispute, private land under court protection, and federal surveillance in place. That last part wasn't true yet, but it made them squirm. They came by that afternoon to photograph the signs. I smiled for the camera and waved. Then I turned and pointed to my own hidden lens in the tree canopy. "Smile back, Karen." I'd gotten used to checking my perimeter cameras like most people check their emails. Every morning, before I even brewed coffee, I'd scan the feeds. East Path, Greenhouse Trail, Old Road Bend, and the Ridgeline. It became muscle memory. Tap, swipe, zoom. Most days it was squirrels, wind-blown branches, or a curious elk sniffing one of the tripods. But that morning, something was off. Camera 5, positioned 50 feet above the eastern fence line, had caught a flash of something metallic the night before. Just for a second, a glint in the moonlight. I replayed the footage 4 times, slowing it down to half speed. It was subtle, almost surgical. I strapped on my boots, took my sidearm, just in case, and hiked straight to the spot. The trees were still damp from morning mist, and the scent of pine was thick in the air. I moved slow, methodical. Years of field training never really left you. You learn to look not at trees, but between them. That's when I spotted it. A matte black trail camera zip-tied 10 feet up a Douglas fir pointed directly toward the back of my cabin. It wasn't mine. I climbed up with a tree ladder, snipped it free, and pulled it into the sunlight. No branding, no serial, just a micro SD slot fully intact. The casing was weather-resistant and professional grade, not a cheap hunter's model. Someone had spent money on this. I kept looking. I found another one 90 yards north, angled toward the garden shed, then one behind the water tank, then one facing the fire pit near the creek, the exact spot where I drink my coffee every sunrise. 5 total, all camouflaged, all mounted in ways that suggested careful planning, and every one of them was on my land. By the time I got back to the house, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but rage. This wasn't surveillance. This was invasion. Someone wanted eyes on me 24/7, wanted to see where I moved, what I built, who I spoke to. Hell, maybe even what I said aloud when no one was around. I pulled the SD cards and plugged them into a clean, offline laptop. The files were endless, labeled by time, sorted by date. I skipped ahead to the previous week and almost choked on my own breath. There I was, hauling lumber, welding beams in the workshop, cleaning the suppressor on my 308, walking shirtless with a jug of water, sleeping in a hammock. They had me, living. I boxed the drives immediately and sealed them. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I called someone from my old world, Duncan Marshall, retired 3-star, now a private security consultant who owed me at least 2 favors. He answered with a grunt. Jesus. Haven't seen your name pop up in 6 years. I need a forensic report. Optical surveillance. Multiple hidden trail cams placed on private land. Pulled 5 units. Still warm. He whistled. Still living like a damn off-grid druid, huh? Just get me your guy. Quiet, fast, clean. Done. Sending you Alan's contact. Alan turned out to be former Army intel and very interested in what I'd found. Within 6 hours, I had an encrypted transfer set up and a courier heading out with the hardware. Meanwhile, Meredith filed a criminal complaint with the county sheriff. Unauthorized surveillance, violation of ORS 163.700, invasion of personal privacy. She was livid. They crossed a legal and ethical line so hard, we could build a whole career off this case. Do you know how illegal this is? Yeah, I said, but I want more than a police report. I want to know who installed them. 2 days later, we got our answer. Alan called. The cams were registered through a commercial installer. The purchase order was traced to a company called Blue Ridge Land Surveying. Not an HOA vendor, I said. Not officially, but their billing address is the same as the HOA's regional development contractor, Cypress Terrain Logistics. Guess who signed the invoice? Let me guess. Karen Drake. I felt my jaw tighten. They didn't just send guys with flags. They sent eyes. To watch me, record me, catch me slipping. They wanted something. Leverage, maybe. Or just proof that I was unstable. A threat. A hermit to be discredited. Too bad for them, I kept my house cleaner than most courtrooms. I handed everything over to the county prosecutor's office. Meredith met with Deputy D.A. Colburn and gave him the full package. Trail cam logs, footage, installer connection, invoice records, and a sworn affidavit from Alan. Colburn didn't mince words. This is premeditated, coordinated surveillance on private property without a warrant or consent. That's criminal. And we're opening a file. Depending on how deep this goes, we're looking at misdemeanor invasion, possibly felony conspiracy if more board members were involved. That night, I posted a single image to my blog. It was the shot from camera 5, zoomed in on the lens of one of their cams, reflecting my cabin window. The caption read, "Watch the forest long enough, and the forest starts watching back." They wanted to play spy games. Wrong damn target. 3 days after the prosecutor's office opened the case, I noticed something odd on my county GIS viewer. I'd pulled up the parcel map to double-check coordinates for an old shed I planned to demolish, but something didn't add up. The eastern edge of my property, which had always been clearly demarcated by an old stone wall, now showed a service corridor easement running straight through it, directly aligned with where those HOA goons had planted their little red flags. It was a thin strip, roughly 15 feet wide, marked Public Safety Access Corridor, newly added with a date stamp from just 10 days earlier. I zoomed in. The label was attached to a subdivision development overlay. Maple Heights Expansion Phase 2. They'd literally redrawn the map to show a fictional right-of-way cutting through my land. I blinked, pulled the archived map from 2 months ago. No such corridor. I ran a public record request on the addition. The application came from a firm called Greenfield Infrastructure Consulting. Applicant of record, a man named Clive Goddard, listed as a contracted land use analyst. One Google search later, I knew I had them. Goddard wasn't just a consultant. He was a part-time county survey office clerk who also happened to be married to Karen Drake's niece. My stomach turned. They hadn't just violated my land. They were gaming the county's internal map systems, adding fake overlays and filing them through nepotism pipelines. It was straight-up manipulation of government records. I called Meredith. What if I told you someone inside the county survey office falsified an access corridor on my land to give the HOA cover for their surveillance and planned construction? She didn't even pause. Then I'd say we have both a civil rights violation and a federal wire fraud case. Give me 30 minutes. By noon, we had an emergency meeting with the county integrity officer. Meredith laid it all out. The altered GIS map, the connected personnel, the invoice trail from Cypress Logistics, the previous criminal surveillance file. The official, a sharp, tired-looking woman named Julia, looked increasingly pale as she skimmed the documentation. "This is serious," she muttered. "I don't even know how this got through approvals. There are supposed to be 3 sign-offs on any easement application, and I don't see a single signature here but Goddard's." Meredith snapped. "Then you better start pulling internal emails. Because if we're right, this isn't just corruption, this is racketeering through a local governance loophole." Meanwhile, I wasn't waiting around. I had my own drone guy, Danny, fly over my perimeter with a LiDAR payload, mapping my real boundaries based on registered plats from 1968. I also had 2 neighbors, both old-timers, give sworn statements about the stone wall that had stood unchallenged for over 50 years as the de facto boundary. And just to ensure no one tried anything sneaky in the meantime, I rented a giant LED sign and mounted it right at the edge of the supposed corridor. The message was simple. You are standing on private property. This is not a public easement. Trespass will be prosecuted. HOA didn't like that. 2 nights later, someone spray painted over the sign with red paint. A crude message, "Community comes first." I laughed. Then I installed thermal cameras and sat by the front gate that entire week with a suppressed rifle across my lap, drinking chamomile tea like I was on vacation. Karen naturally couldn't resist. She showed up at the gate in her ridiculous silver Escalade, clutching a folder and a smug smile. "Mr. Lambert," she cooed through the intercom. "I'm offering one last chance to cooperate before this becomes unpleasant for everyone." I stared into the lens and said, "Karen, I will watch you burn your HOA to the ground before I let a single inch of my forest be paved by your psychotic expansion vision." She blinked, a crack in the mask, then turned and peeled away. By that Friday, state investigators had arrived at the county office. By Monday, Clive Goddard was on administrative leave. By Wednesday, the county issued a full retraction of the fake easement, citing procedural fraud and internal manipulation. But that wasn't the best part. The Oregon State Department of Justice issued a letter of inquiry to Maple Heights HOA, demanding all internal communications, emails, land use plans, and surveillance justifications from the last 6 months. And for the first time since this circus began, Karen shut the hell up. After the retraction of the fake easement, I figured the worst was behind me. I was wrong. Exactly 6 days later, my driveway alarms triggered just after 2 a.m. Not the outer motion sensors, but the pressure pad buried halfway up the gravel incline. That one only tripped if something heavy was moving in. I pulled the monitor. Infrared silhouettes, 3 figures in hooded jackets, moving fast, low to the ground, cutting across my tree line and heading straight for the utility shed where I kept my diesel backups and surveillance hub. I didn't hesitate. grabbed the Remington 870, flipped the external floodlights, and barked into the outdoor PA. Private property. You are being recorded. You have 10 seconds to back off, or I call the sheriff. They scattered. 2 ran into the woods. The 3rd dove under the deck and disappeared. I circled around, staying in cover, and when I reached the far side of the cabin, I spotted him. Mid-30s, short beard, HOA-issued windbreaker, trying to disable one of my cellular relays. With wire cutters. I didn't aim the shotgun at him. I just racked it once, loud. He froze like a deer in headlights. By the time the county sheriff arrived, at 3:30 a.m., I had the guy zip-tied under a tarp, sitting beside a thermos of coffee I made just to be polite. Deputies took him in without much fuss, especially once I showed them the hard drive footage and the tampered wiring. It didn't take long before his name came up. Derek Fulton, listed as infrastructure volunteer on Maple Heights Community Planning Board. He told officers he was sent to check on utility overlap, without a warrant, at 2 in the morning, with bolt cutters. I didn't need a jury to smell Karen's fingerprints on this, but this time, I went further. At 8 a.m., I uploaded the entire surveillance video, infrared footage, audio warning, full footage of the apprehension and arrival of law enforcement to my blog and cross-posted it to a survivalist legal defense forum with a clickbaity title, HOA Operative. Caught sabotaging my forest security system. Here's the proof. The video went viral within hours. I got emails from journalists, attorneys, even a podcast producer asking for interviews. But the real fireworks began when Channel 12 Portland picked it up. They had already been sniffing around since the easement scandal. By nightfall, they ran a full story titled Private Landowner vs. HOA, Surveillance Sabotage, and a Plot to Redraw Property Lines. They even spliced in footage of Karen giving a smug HOA speech from 2 months ago about integrated expansion and cleaning up forest blight. Now she looked like a lunatic. And then, pure gold. The Sheriff's Department issued a public statement confirming that criminal trespass charges were being filed against Fulton and that they were investigating organizational involvement. That was the first time the name Maple Heights Homeowners Association appeared in a criminal context on official county letterhead. I forwarded the press release to Meredith. She replied with 2 words, "Now we squeeze." The very next day, we filed a civil counterclaim for invasion of privacy, attempted sabotage, and emotional distress. And, just to make sure no one mistook me for passive, I had a 4x8 steel sign installed right behind my new reinforced gate. Painted black, with white block letters, "Trespassers will be prosecuted. Evidence will be published." By then, I was sleeping with my boots on. Literally, because I had a feeling Karen wasn't done yet. 3 days after the broadcast hit local TV, my inbox was a war zone. Some of it was support. Landowners, veterans, survivalists, and a couple ex-HOA members who knew exactly the type of woman Karen was. But mixed in were veiled threats, cryptic legal warnings, even one anonymous voicemail telling me to leave it alone before someone gets hurt. I didn't flinch. Instead, I hired a licensed counter-surveillance expert from Eugene, guy named Will Strader, ex-NSA. We swept the entire property, and what we found made my blood run cold. 7 hidden cameras, 2 on trees just outside my solar array, 1 wired into a fake birdhouse near my garden, 4 more spaced along the western boundary line, and not mine. They were active and transmitting. Industrial frequency tagged to a generic HOA-linked tech contractor. We pulled them all. Will bagged and cataloged them for evidence, with timestamps proving weeks of live monitoring, audio and visual. Meredith filed an emergency motion for unlawful surveillance. The county court granted it within 48 hours. Subpoenas went flying to Maple Heights HOA, to their board members, and most importantly, into the local zoning department. And that's when the cracks really opened. It turns out the HOA had paid a city official named Troy Beeman to temporarily adjust property boundary lines in their GIS system, specifically marking my land as public easement pending infrastructure development. A massive paper fraud to justify the gate, the flags, the roadwork. Beeman was put on leave the same day we exposed it. Karen tried to spin it, saying the digital error was corrected and that she had no personal knowledge of the incident. But we had emails with her initials and directives uncovered in a public records request that Meredith had quietly filed 2 weeks earlier. Worse yet, One of the board members, a man named Stan Hoyt, flipped under pressure. His deposition was damning. He admitted that Karen instructed them to apply soft pressure to discourage occupancy on my land, that she authorized the gate herself, and that she had greenlit the night visit by Derek Fulton. The language in his statement was clear. The goal was to force the landowner to cooperate by making his use of the property difficult, time-consuming, and eventually not worth it. The county prosecutor got involved. Criminal investigations opened into Karen Beeman and 2 other board members. HOA's insurance carrier dropped them by the end of the week, citing breach of policy and legal exposure. Meanwhile, I sat on my porch with a cup of black coffee, watching my motion-activated sentry lights track empty air. It was quiet now, but that heavy kind of quiet, the kind that hangs before a storm breaks, and I knew it was coming. Because next week, we were going to court, and I wasn't going alone. Court was packed. Half the county must have shown up. Ranchers, retirees, hikers, even a few reporters with local press badges. One of them tried to interview me outside the courthouse. I just said, "Stay for the show." Inside, Karen looked drained. Her expensive blazer hung limp, and for the first time, she wasn't barking orders. Her eyes darted between her lawyer and the growing pile of evidence Meredith kept introducing. Land records, GIS overlays, time-stamped photos from the cameras, Stan Hoyt's deposition, and the email chain where Karen approved the entire containment protocol for my property. The judge, a sharp old veteran named Harold Gates, didn't take long. He opened with this. Let the record show this is one of the most egregious examples of property rights violations this court has ever seen. HOA's defense tried to argue that emergency development needs justified temporary actions. Judge Gates interrupted mid-sentence. This isn't an easement. This is a siege. By noon, the ruling came down hard. The court found the HOA guilty of unlawful entry and trespass, installation of unauthorized surveillance equipment, forgery and fraud in municipal record-keeping, harassment and malicious interference with private land use. Karen's sentence, 10 years state prison, with additional charges pending for wiretapping and bribery still under investigation. Troy Beeman, the zoning official, was fired, indicted, and agreed to testify in further proceedings. The 2 board members who followed Karen's orders were fined and banned from holding HOA positions ever again. HOA Maple Heights was ordered to pay me $620,000 in damages, remove all physical installations within 10 days, officially revoke any claim to bordering land permanently filed with the county recorder. But that wasn't the best part. As the sheriff walked Karen out of the courtroom in cuffs, the crowd stood up and applauded. People I'd never met clapped, whistled, even shouted, "Justice!" A reporter snapped a photo just as Karen turned to glare at me. I gave her a wink. Back home, I got to work. Installed my new custom gate, reinforced steel with an emergency drop trigger, wired up a new motion sensor grid around the property line. Then I welded a new sign at the entrance, just above the keypad. Private Forest. Trespassers will be featured in my next book. A week later, I dropped the first video in a new series, How to Defend Your Land from HOA Tyrants. Over 200,000 views in a weekend. The book's coming next. And Karen, she's got 10 years to read it.